Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining. With this small audience, maybe we have a better opportunity to curate, right? Allow me to introduce ourselves, right? My name is Vineet Ahuja. I lead strategy and consulting for Accenture. And
Hi, my name is Sheth. I'm a managing director with ChrysCapital. I lead ChrysCapital's investments for pharmaceuticals as well as consumer tech.
all right, armed with that, we have an exciting topic today on digital native brands or DNB. I'll make an assumption that people in the room are conversant with the topic and we can build upon that further. But let me take a pause and check if that assumption is correct or we need to take stock and bring some part of the audience to speed. Can we assume, is there anybody who's not comfortable with the terminology and needs to be inducted? Digital native brands? All right, in just a minute, it is digital means of reaching the consumer, be it sales and marketing. It closely overlaps with D2C, but D2C can be beyond DNB, which is part of what traditional companies do, right? Let's come to this question, Kshitij. I mean, you have a plethora of experience investing into companies. Digital native brands was quite the buzz a couple of years ago, right? And yet we see few successes. What do you think went wrong?
So Vineet, first of all, it's difficult to paint everything with one brush and say what went wrong, because I don't think everything went wrong. There are several companies that actually end up doing quite well. We just saw Mama Earth go public. That's a shining example of what's done well in this space. But yeah, the buzz and the excitement that was there maybe 2-3 years ago, which kind of peaked maybe just post-COVID, that has gone down quite a bit in our view. Now, I have to sort of step back and say, look, we are private equity. We look at things very, very late stage.
Right.
So at scale, at profit is when we sort of look at investments. So from that perspective, certainly things have been a bit disappointing. We haven't seen a lot of brands that seemingly had a lot of potential grow to the scale and the profitability that one would have expected.
Right.
Why is that the case? I think, look, it boils down to two things in my view. One is age-old Porter's five forces, competition, right? Competition is here. I think during COVID and post-COVID, there was such a surge in the digital economy and e-commerce that a lot of the traditional players were left flat-footed, right? And they weren't able to catch up as quickly with this whole digital world. So it took them a few years, but I think a lot of them are now head-on into this digital space.
Right.
You hear of Unilever and P&G and all of these large companies having digitally focused brands as well. So I think that competition is real, and competition has led to scaling becoming a little difficult and certainly profitability becoming difficult as well. And the second one is, I think, the funding environment. Some part of it is, we have only ourselves to blame. During the hype period, there ended up being a lot of funding happening.
Right.
A lot of companies that really stretched valuations, which led to a change in behavior, right? Loss making became acceptable. You get a sense of nothing can go wrong because I've been funded, and that led to perhaps a combination of complacency and and just assuming that funding is here forever. And when the funding dried up, as it did because of the inflationary environment, because of the wars, the Ukraine war, for example, that did lead to a lot of the digitally native brands being lost. Right, because they didn't know where they get their funding from, and then they have to make choices on scale, choices on reducing scale or not growing as fast. So I think it's a combination of those things that led to the hype being deflated quite a bit. But look, you work a lot with these large consumer brands too. What do you think went wrong?
Yeah, so I think maybe I'll pick two parts of what you said in response to that. First is, if I can use the word froth versus pith, right? Early on in digital, we were taught, don't run after the cool, run after the money, right?
Yeah.
And I will say that traditional companies are good at this business understanding also because they are forced to report results to the street, right? So that acumen, muscle is better equipped. The other thing say is, and as you mentioned, the HULs of the world are also quite savvy these days. They were flat-footed, but savvy these days. And indeed, if you think of companies like Apple and Nike, they'll almost pass as digital natives, right, today. And my big realization, folks, is that digital is both a product and a medium. So DNBs are most successful in either of two contexts when digital is core to the product, say personalization, deep analytics, or the medium serves differentiated products which are not easily available. So differentiated niche for which viable scale may not be there for traditional companies. That's when D2C really cuts the path, right? So I think these are two my learnings, but let me pass the mic back to you, Kshitij. What do you think these companies should do differently, and whichever ways you want to articulate, but scale, profitability, differentiation are three vectors that come to my mind.
Yeah, I think differentiation, let's start with the third vector, differentiation, right? I think, essentially India, you're going to find people copy you if you're successful. That's just the reality of the market here. So you can't expect your first differentiated product to last forever. You have to be constantly innovating. At least we've found that, companies that constantly innovate are the ones that end up succeeding in scaling. And so really sort of setting aside some percentage of your revenues to that. Right? I know there's always a tight rope that you're walking on profitability. Should I spend more money on marketing or branding or employees or technology? But I think setting aside some portion for R&D, for lack of a better word, or innovation, for lack of a better word, is very important, because that's going to help you in the long run a lot. So on differentiation, I'd say that's what it is. On scale and profitability, I mean, obviously at different sizes, you'll have different issues. There's a very different journey from 0 to 400, 500 crores. There's a very different journey, 500 crores and beyond. But I think, look, this whole sense that, I just need to grow and someone will fund me through losses for my growth, that bubble has to burst. And basically, having unit economics from a very early stage, maybe even at 100, 200 crore sort of scale, is very important. Some of your fixed costs can go down over time, but on a unit basis, you have to be profitable. I don't mean break even. You have to be profitable from a very early scale. Otherwise, things will go south pretty soon.
Right.
But from your perspective, since Accenture does a lot of work with companies to help them differentiate and be different and even help with their operations, where do you think the answer lies in this?
So maybe I'll begin with scale, because scale is the first barrier which one has to cross, and we realize that the number of digital native consumers to whom DNBs can cater to is a limited audience of around 1 crore people, right? So to the degree of penetration that the business model might have, the business model in core peaks out at an annual run rate of anywhere between 50 to 200 crore, right? And if that saturation point has arrived and it has to be broken, then one has to diversify in any of these three dimensions. And in descending order, at least what we have seen is, first is go from online to offline. That's relatively the easiest. Also, it gives scale and profits. Mamaearth is a good example of that. The second can be that of alternate products, house of brands, again Mamaearth and MyGlam. Or it can be newer geographies. So keeping the channel and product the same, explore newer geographies. And a good example is, say, Wow, going from Amazon India to US, right? So that's what I would say about scale. But also there comes a stage where one has to focus or put a foot today and a foot in tomorrow. And that's why having good R&I budgets, again for want of better word, very important. The best of companies at scale put 3% of their revenue year on year, right? And that is on basic research and innovation. So investing for differentiation, I think, is also important. So is execution. There comes a stage where execution becomes a differentiator, especially in digital, when the interactions and the transactions, given the sheer magnitude of them. So I think all of this, and finally maybe on profitability, Kshitij, as you rightly said, do not leave this for later on. Bring the proof of profitability or the path to profitability early on. So maybe it might be worthwhile when we create digital ventures for our clients, that we'll separate bandwidth and capacity for somebody to focus on profitability from day one, take a small pilot, microwave that, and test the profitability early on to expose any chinks in the armor. So these are some examples that I can think of how one can offset or do differently on scale, profitability, and differentiation.
No, on your point on offline, I think that's something I completely agree with. I don't think, I mean, just how you had some of your traditionally offline large consumer businesses becoming flat-footed during post-COVID, the same way the digitally native brands cannot be flat-footed when it comes to getting offline. Right? Ultimately, brand creation will only happen if you're omni-channel. You can't grow beyond a certain scale unless you're omni-channel. So I think if you want to remain in India, you have to go offline. I think that's one thing I also feel is completely on point.
Fair point. Fair point. All right. Yeah. All right. Maybe this question also, since we do have some time, 3.5 minutes remaining, would you prefer a situation where the TAM is very large and target market share is small, or vice versa?
Age-old question, very difficult to answer. Because if you have a large TAM, there's always potential for growth. But if you have a small TAM and you've built a great amount of market share or wallet share in it, it shows you have what it takes to build leadership in a category, right? So I would personally opt for the latter.
All right.
Given that you have shown execution, you've shown that you can execute and create wallet share and leadership in a category, and then perhaps that can be repeated in 1 or 2 categories as you go ahead. The issue with a large TAM is that, look, competition, right? It's
right.
This, you can't work in isolation in this world.
Right.
So you can't live in a bubble. So you may just feel like you have a large TAM and you're swimming in a very large ocean, but the sharks will come.
Fair point, fair point. You know, that's a very purist answer. Strategic purists have threshold of share within and salience within, so that one is secure. And I go with that answer because DNBs, as per research, work best when they expand the market. And when you are investing through those 2-3%, whatever we said, ideally should expand the core on which they continuously take more than a fair share. Right, and that's the most profitable and sustainable path to growth. Yeah. This last question, and then we are good, Kshitij. If there is one thought you'd want to leave the audience with, maybe based on what you said, the last 10 minutes, or maybe otherwise, what is that one thing you'd say?
Maybe I'd say, look, fundraising is not the end goal. It's an end to a means. It's a means to an end. It's not the end. So be careful with fundraising. Don't take the first check you get. Just be very judicious with that thought process. But that's my one message. Despite being in the investing world, I think as entrepreneurs, you should be very judicious when it comes to raising money. Treat your shareholding very sort of preciously. And just don't raise money unless you really need to. Vineet, if I could repeat the same question to you, your own question to yourself.
All right. I think the one thing for me is that the age-old business fundamentals always shine through. So be it one-time strategic choices of where to play. I mean, in this world it's called TAM, but where to play is a more nuanced direction. Or be it the right to win, which is what we alluded to, differentiation. So the age-old metrics always rule, and the trifecta for success remains product, innovation, and route to market. So till the time one takes a wholesome and a sustainable, scalable view of this, I think one is in good space, else not.
Well said, Vineet.
Armed with this, I think let's pause. We are well on time. It has been an absolute pleasure, Kshitij. And on behalf of the audience, I thank you. It was wonderful jamming. Right?
Thanks, Vineet, and thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Right.